This is a Headgum podcast.
Hello, this is Fake the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about culture, and where we wonder why we have to talk about Hunter Biden. I am your host, Negin Farsad, and I'm so sorry, you guys, but we are going to talk about Hunter Biden, but we'll also talk about an employment trend that hits older employees against younger college grads. We'll talk about the decline of Red Lobster and what that means about that kind of family restaurant, and we'll also talk about Alito's chitchat at cocktail parties and the popularity of life coaching. So much going on in today's show. It is going to be a banger, chiefly because of the panel that we have gathered here today. I am so psyched to be joined by these two. Now, you've heard him on this show before. I actually just had the distinct honor of being on his show, Jordan and Jesse Go, because he is a podcaster, but that's not all he is. He cannot be defined by one mere moniker.
Don't put me in a box.
He is a bird of many feathers. He's a writer, he's a podcaster. In fact, he's got a graphic novel out right now for pre-order. Okay, so it's coming out very soon. It is called Youth Group. And if you know anything about this guy and how fun and funny he is, you should immediately be pre-ordering Youth Group. It is the wonderful Jordan Morris. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, glad to be here, even if we are talking about Hunter Biden. I'll talk about
you guys are you've really taken a bullet for everybody today, the two of you.
Yes, exactly. My cross to bear. I suffer for you, the audience.
And we are also joined for the first time, the financial therapist and host of the Audible original series, Emotional Investment, which is just a show that has all of the dirty, sexy, painful, interesting conversations about money that just consume all of us. I want to say I think about money all day long. And so this is, if you're like me, then this show is for you. It is the wonderful Amanda Clayman.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Amanda, do people tell, I think I said that for the first time in my life right now, that I think about money all day long, but it's not like I actively think about it but it is an undercurrent to everything I do. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's just an undercurrent all day long.
You know, that is why I went into this field, because I want to help get those thoughts out of people's heads and out into the world where we can actually talk about them and work on them and hopefully get to a less messy place than most of us are when it comes to our relationship with money.
God, bless your heart, because it is, I need to download your wisdom, because I feel like I have too many of those thoughts invading my head all the time.
The water is messy.
But before we get into the show, I just want to remind listeners that they can support the show by going to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. You get bonus episodes of the show every month for as little as $4 a month, which is just what a delight. You get bonus episodes of the thing you love, which is episodes of the show. And the bonuses is where we really let our hair down, where we address some of life's greater questions, where sometimes we get fucking petty and it's fun. So go to patreon.com/Negin Farsad. And I'm so grateful for everyone who has been supporting the show on Patreon. You guys are, so great. And thanks to everyone who just listens to the show, tells their friends about the show, and downloads the show. You guys are really fucking great. So now let us get into it with topic number 1. So we're going to dip into the cultural grab bag, and we're going to look at a recent study that showed that 38% of employers avoid hiring recent grads in favor of older workers. 1 in 5 employers have had a recent college graduate bring a parent to a job interview. What? And 58% say recent college grads are simply not prepared for the workforce. So these are 3 fun data points that I'm sharing with you guys. Were you surprised by that? Amanda, we'll start with you. This is kind of adjacent to your field.
I died reading that story. I as a parent of a Gen Zer, I was really thinking like, how prepared are my kids to enter the workforce?
Right.
I do like to give them high marks for eye contact, which was one of the things that employers were very upset about. In
Oh
this,
my
that
God.
it seemed like the kids today don't like to look people in the eye. They don't want to turn their camera on if they're doing a Zoom interview. um, there were a lot of relational things that I think older employers were really having a hard time with when it comes to connecting with their younger employees. But ultimately, this to me really seemed like a question of culture. There's kind of an existing workplace culture, which is determined by the people who are the bosses, right? And then there are people who are coming up who are going to join this culture. And the question is, who is going to change whom? Is it the kids who are going to get socialized, mentored, et cetera, to become kind of better employees according to the definition of those who are currently in the boss seat? Or are the kids today going to maybe this is their kind of attack on the capitalist system, and they are here to crack some skulls and be difficult and to maybe change something? So I'm here with the popcorn. I may in fact accompany my child to an interview because that's how involved I am as a mom. But and nobody's going to keep me out of that waiting room while my kid is interviewed.
What did you think, Jordan? I mean, by the way, the eye contact thing, I don't have the specific number, but it was, I mean, there was like a plurality of respondents talked about eye contact being a huge issue. So I thought that was very interesting. Jordan, what did you make of these stats?
But first of all, I love eye contact. I love to make long, unbroken eye contact and then go, That's my move. I will
it's not
say,
creepy at all.
No, it's not. It's great. It establishes intimacy. Why I'm always hired for every job. I will say I have a hard time believing the parents coming to job interviews thing. That to me,
I mean, that was like 19%. Reported having experienced that.
It sounds to me like a boomer ghost story. It sounds like a ghost story they tell. It's like,
yeah,
ooh, and then they changed their pronouns. It sounds like something the New York Post made up. But I will say that, like, I mean, I kind of get it. I was such a mess in my early 20s. I was such a mess. It's the messiest I have ever been. I was like constantly drunk. I probably asked every job I ever had to leave early because I had to do an improv show for 5 people in an abandoned Sears. You're just kind of a mess, and you're figuring yourself out. So I imagine like office jobs with schedules are just tough at that age. They would have been for me too. So I kind of get it, but also I think there is just some like stodgy boomer energy in this article too. Like there was a note about like they take things too seriously, or they, they're too offended was in this. And I'm like, okay, someone tried to give the intern a back rub. Someone tried to give the intern a back rub and was told don't do that, and is like, oh, these kids, you can't even rub your coworkers back these days. So
right.
I think there's stuff going on both sides, but I do think there's a little bit of like boomer hysteria in this article.
Okay, but I'll add some other potentially boomer hysteria. Although again, it's like that. There was a survey. They talked about methodology. I don't know. We don't know about it. I didn't really dive deep into like the scientific method they employed. However, there are more stats that I thought were interesting. 61% say they are frequently late to work. Now, there's no mention of whether an improv show was involved in that, but I imagine in some cases, yes. 59% say they often miss deadlines and assignments. And 53% say they are frequently, that was a repeat. Oh no, that they're entitled, that they basically behave in entitled fashion. And one of the things that I also found interesting was that a lot of them start off with like a salary ask that's like wildly unreasonable. So I thought that was interesting, like this brew of no experience, like totally still lacking in professional modes of behavior, and then this odd confidence about like salary demands. Like I thought that was like just an interesting mix of person. Are you, Amanda, do you see that in the kind of like recent college grad Gen Z demographic?
You know, it's funny because I've been in the workforce long enough that I can remember having this conversation about millennials. So all of these things that we're kind of like assigning to Gen Z maybe is just, to Jordan's point, like we're all kind of messy at that age. Like we are developing our sense of appropriateness. And one of the things in this article is it talked about the need for mentorship of young workers, and I would say all young workers. Right?
Yeah.
Like can we just build that into the model of what young workers need, that we don't shoot out of the womb as like little CPAs, you know,
Right.
who are professionally socialized. That is somebody's job. And I think sometimes we don't enjoy the awkwardness of it. It's not fun to give, I mean, for many of us, it's not fun to give negative feedback or to, like, I will say in the realm of money, that being asked for something, so on the salary thing in particular, like being told by a person who's interviewing for a job that they assess their value at something higher than the organization is prepared to be able to provide, like that can touch off a lot of feelings in a person. So they might be going into their own stuff about like, gosh, I wish my business was doing better so that I could afford to pay more to my workers. Or, you know, when I was younger, I was afraid to ask for more. So this person feeling like they have the confidence to do that is really taking me to a vulnerable and insecure place. I had a lot of questions, kind of like when Jordan was saying it was given like some boomer energy here. It's like, when I have my therapist hat on here, I'm really thinking like what is the context of the people who are filling this out? Where are they coming from? What are their issues that are showing up, and how they're kind of like pushing the blame and the judgment onto the young folks?
Are they
and
telling?
Can I say that? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Are these people, I don't know, telling Polish jokes around the water cooler and being and being mad when people don't laugh?
Can I say that like it's interesting because I feel like when I was in a position to hire, first of all, as a young hire, I also was the kind of person that was like, I've got to go do a show, so I'll be leaving, you know, like, or like, can I like just go ahead and use this printer to print scripts?
Me too. I
yes.
absolutely
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. What are those printers for? But to print the scripts of aspiring comedians.
Sure.
But I also was like a particular type of college graduate, right? Who like, you know, worked really hard, went to a good school, got good grade. Like I was like, and I was like reliable and like an immigrant ethic, whatever, you know, like, so I had all those things going for me. And I remember when I was hiring, I kind of like was looking for the Negins out there, of which there are plenty you can hire. Right. And it's funny because I ended up with this, like mostly not to offend you, Jordan, female workforce. Like I ended up hiring a lot of women because I was like, I feel like they're just gonna be like 5% more reliable and hardworking, just because society has been, you know, shitting on women for centuries, and so we've been working through that. Like, you know,
we're like, it's our fault. I'll take responsibility. I'll just do more.
You know what? Yeah, I'll just compensate for society's problems. And so yeah, so I feel like there's still those people out there. But part of me is just like, yeah, in any hiring situation, a bunch of people are going to be wrong for the job.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of people, and then there's going to be a few go-getters who you can really rely on. And those are the people you hire. You know what I mean? Okay, but let's get into this other issue of the decline of Red Lobster. Now, it was a big news item that Red Lobster was declaring bankruptcy because, in large part, of the asset stripping by the private equity company that own them. And this has happened to Sears and Mervyn's and a bunch of other chains. It's actually a really sad ending for some of these like beloved American brands. But now, forgetting that for a second, is the Red Lobster, like the type of restaurant that it is, past its heyday? Like, where do these kinds of restaurant chains live in the popular American imagination now? Jordan?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was talking about this with a friend because we both have really like fond memories of these kind of like sit down chains, right? Like you get a fun appetizer platter, the parents can get a little drink, the kids can get a menu with crayons. Like these are really fun kinds of restaurants, but it does seem like they're going away. And I think people are migrating, at least in like LA and similar, to like the brewery, right? Like everybody's going to the brewery that has cornhole.
Okay.
It's filled with kids and dogs.
Yeah.
Parents can get beer and wine, and then you still have that same kind of like burger, appetizer platter, nacho type food. So it does seem like.
So, but also what you're also pointing to is like there are family-like establishments that are, you know, filling the void, but they're also independent, like they're not a chain. Amanda, what have you noticed in your family life?
Well, as a Midwesterner who is doing her best impression these days of a coastal elite,
You're doing really well.
I
never would
love
have known.
chains.
I never would have known.
So growing up, Red Lobster was like, that was the fancy place.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like that was reserved for like graduations and
grandma's in
like,
town. We want to wow grandma.
Like, yes, but it also, I mean, and talk about the Midwestern sweet spot, like offering an all-you-can-eat option of shrimp. Yes, please. Like I can do some damage on an all-you-can-eat situation. I kind of have this nostalgic appreciation. I don't think it's necessarily the greatest business model, especially like as tastes change and people sort of gravitate toward something that maybe is more of a local, you know, unique kind of a dining experience. But I'm sad to see it go. And I just want to share a really like fun fact about Amanda, which is that there is one Google hit for me when of my maiden name. I changed my name when I got married. And it is for a New York Times article where I was interviewed because I was eating alone in a Manhattan Olive Garden. And the reporter was doing a piece on like who eats and like when you're in New York City, like who would eat at an Olive Garden. And my whole thing was like, I have such a strong emotional attachment to these places that are like the foods of my childhood. And my fiance, now husband, was out of town. He grew up in Manhattan. He would never go to this Olive Garden. So I was eating there by myself. So I think that we have to really appreciate. Oh, and I was loud and proud in the New York Times about it.
Sounds like you like a restaurant where you can get unlimited something.
You know, that is a very accurate perception, Jordan. Yes.
Maybe this is why you got into economics. Like these are just
Midwestern
values.
Yes, I very much care about that.
Part of the reason that you mentioned nostalgia, and part of the only reason I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about this, is because one of our listeners, Michael, actually sent an article to me about Flava Flav trying to single-handedly save Red Lobster by like going to a Red Lobster and just ordering a ton of food and like inviting his family and whatever. And he was just like, "We're gonna save the biscuit. We're gonna, you know," and what, you know, first of all, it was just funny because Flava Flav is just historically a funny dude. But also what I think was also really interesting to me about that piece was like the very reason that Flava Flav identifies so strongly with Red Lobster is also the reason why Red Lobster is past its prime. You know what I mean? It's like it's like putting it's like a nostalgia guy eating at a nostalgia place. It's like, guys, it's time. You know what I mean? Right. And there's something also, I think I've never eaten at one, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but like, we just didn't have them where I grew up. And then, I don't know. And then by the time I left, for college. There wasn't one where I went to college. And then at a certain age, you're like, let me see how long I can go without ever eating at one. You know what I mean? Then it's like a challenge.
Negin, do you have like a chain that you have nostalgia for? Is there like one where
Carl's
you're like,
Jr.,
oh,
which
okay.
is
That's a good one.
which is with cheap, really cheap. It's not like a sit down family, but it's like a cheap burger place. And we don't have them on the East Coast. I guess we have Hardee's. I think it's the same thing. I'm not entirely sure, but Carl's Jr. is what I grew up on. The double Western bacon cheeseburger can do no wrong. In my mind, I always think, oh, I'm going to go home for Christmas. I usually go home for like 2 weeks to Southern California, and I think like, oh, I'm going to have like 3 Western bacon cheeseburgers while I'm there. And I have one, and then I'm like, how did I ever eat these? Like it's so densely packed with every kind of thing that'll put you in an early grave. And so I like, your mouth is just covered in the film of poor health. You know what I mean? After you eat one of those burgers,
right.
But yet that nevertheless, they are delicious. And that is the chain I will defend till my dying days.
You know what this reminds me of, though, is like all of the furor. So people in my world went bananas when HBO Max became Max.
Yeah.
And it was like, this brand that I'm so attached to is going away. And like what you were saying about Flava Flav being kind of like, he's not a young dude. He's not
As
hip
part
with
of the
kids,
zeitgeist, yeah.
right? And those things that are so important to us or to the other people in our kind of reference social group, it can seem like these are big important things, but sometimes it's an indication that like the economy has moved on and these social practices have moved on as well.
I love ending on that note. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Michael for sending that article, because I just got a real kick out of it. And follow Michael's lead, folks, whenever you want to send me a thing that you saw that's interesting. This is how I collect the material for the show, is like people will talk to me, tell me things. Send me DMs, whatever, like or send emails to Fake the Nation at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com about stuff that they want to hear us chat about. So feel free to always do that at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. And let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue talking. And we are back. And the moment none of us have been waiting for, Hunter Biden. Guys, Hunter Biden was found guilty on 3 felony counts related to purchasing a gun when he was still addicted to drugs. Basically, he lied on a questionnaire, a form asking if he was using drugs while he was purchasing this gun. Now, obviously, I have so many feelings about this case, one of which is that it's so small and inconsequential to the nation at large. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is I think that, like, most of the time charges are not brought in a case like this. Like, that's just historically the case with this particular charge. It's not something that's brought on its own. If he wasn't Hunter Biden, there would be no national attention. Again, like, I'm in the camp of no man is above the law. So if there was a crime committed here, that's great. But I guess my question for you both is, like, what role does this play in the political landscape? We're on week 2 of prominent men or, well-known dudes getting guilty verdicts. What does that all mean?
I think there's an element here of just like it's salacious. It's interesting, right? Like, Succession has been off the air for a while, and Hunter Biden is a Succession character.
Right. He's the Jeremy Strong.
Yeah, totally. He's maybe all of them mixed together. If all of the Succession kids got into the matter transporter from The Fly, they spit out Hunter Biden. So there's that element. But, I think there's just also a deal of, like, this wouldn't be so prominent if the Trump thing wasn't going on at the same time. I think there's an element of, like, the right is looking at it like, oh, Trump's going to be guilty and Hunter's going to get off because that's how rigged everything is. So I think that there's an element of, like, the media is covering it to show that the justice system treats both sides equally. Yeah, it would be interesting. I bet we wouldn't be seeing this much Hunter if we weren't also seeing Trump on trial.
It's just crazy to me, though, that it's about guns. Like an attack on guns, because man, we make it super easy for folks to get guns, and it seems like our main focus is like, my goodness, if somebody wants a gun and you get in the way of that, if you delay that, if you say only some people are allowed to have guns, then that's just like America will crumble if we are to do that. And now all of a sudden, like the kind of hill that
conservatives
I'm
are
trying,
dying on,
I'm trying not to make it so partisan, but I don't know, it just seems very ironic to me. And one of the things that I saw in some of this coverage too is like, we're asking people about drugs and drug abuse. Nowhere in any of this screening process is there a mention of alcohol or alcoholism, which is by far a much bigger and more prevalent issue. And I think if we are to look at kind of at problems that happen because of guns and shootings and deaths, et cetera, that we're going to see alcoholism a much bigger factor. So this just feels like a really tortured and convoluted way to try to kind of bring somebody down, going through a system where Americans are just, we do not have it figured out. And in most cases, it seems like we err on the side of being overly permissive when it comes to who has access to guns in our country.
Yeah, and one of the things I think it highlighted for me was just like, our main safeguard for a gun is this dumb piece of paper that probably most people fill out the way they accept conditions on an app. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, I can't believe that this is the safeguard. This is not which is to say, this is not a safeguard, except for when you're a very driven prosecutor who wants to figure out a way to make this, be meaningful.
Exactly.
And so congratulations. He should not have been able to purchase a gun, for the record. Like, absolutely. If the timeline that they constructed about his drug use and all of that stuff, if all of that is accurate, then I would have done what the jury did. I would have convicted him. He should not have been able to purchase this gun. And he lied on this form. But it's like, he lied on a form. That's how we're selling people instruments of murder. It's just insane to me. It is insane to me. But of course, the other thing that I think it highlighted, I lost a friend recently who had a very similar, like, there was like, he had a drug addiction. He had lost a sibling early in life and then lost another sibling, just like Hunter did later in life, that kind of resurrected a drug abuse issue. And I was just thinking, like, one of the things about this that felt so, just so sad was, first of all, to see Jill Biden was at the court almost every day. I think she had to take a day off to like go to France and be a part of a ceremony, but she was there every day. All of his entire family. He was incredibly supported by his family. And also, like, they all had to, like, a bunch of them had to get on there and talk about all these horrible moments of addiction and watching him struggle. And some of them also struggled with him. It just was like, this was brutal. You know what I mean? To, like, for a family to have to undergo, like, this was brutal. Obviously, they're a very public family, it's like comes with the territory. But my God, I think one of the things that it sort of did for me was just to show, like, no one is above the law, and it doesn't matter what your last name is. And I kind of like the symmetry of the convictions, the Trump conviction, the Biden conviction. Guys, they both got convicted. Their last names didn't matter. It would have been rough, I think, if he didn't get convicted. I don't know. What do you think?
I hear you on that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, I'll go ahead. I think that it's at this point in our kind of like, hey, is the world on fire? To what extent is it on fire? That there is something kind of reassuring when the rule of law does seem to to work as it's designed to work. This does feel like kind of cherry picking some fact patterns in terms of like what we choose to prosecute in the country, and whether or not that is politically motivated. That could probably be its own panel in and of itself. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just there's so much like insane stuff happened in the trial. Like they played excerpts from like his audio book to incriminate him. Like, I think the lesson is just like, never write a memoir. Write a supernatural romance about sexy werewolves. That's what people want to read. And
that was my main takeaway from all of this, is that we should all be writing supernatural memoirs about sexy werewolves.
Exactly.
So thank you.
That can never bite you in the ass in court.
I know.
Or graphic novels. Go for a graphic novel.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yank.
All right. Well, let's quickly talk about the secret recording of Justice Alito, because basically what happened this week is a story broke that a liberal activist who was pretending to be a conservative Catholic at an event, she secretly recorded a conversation with Justice Alito and also with Chief Justice Roberts. But the Alito stuff was a little bit, was a bit damning. She at one point said to him, people in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness. And he kind of like agreed with that. So that was part of the tape. He also said something like, one side or the other is going to win. There are differences on fundamental things that can't be compromised. So he had a lot of positions that sounded a little what you would expect, I guess. But that we haven't heard in recorded format. Now, you might have some ethical issues about how this was obtained, and if you do, feel free to talk about that. But in general, what were your takes about these recordings?
I missed the detail that it was an activist masquerading as a Catholic. That's kind of fascinating. I immediately envisioned just someone who rented a nun costume from Spirit Halloween, like sister acted it and maybe hid the recorder up in the habit.
Right.
Wild. Yeah, I know. I mean, the Supreme Court people are doing a worse and worse job of hiding their bias, and it's a little scary. I think maybe the main argument you could give for a Biden vote this time around is like, let's maybe not let Trump put any more of these people on the Supreme Court. It's a bad idea. So,
I mean, for the record, Alito is from
Bush, I think.
Oh,
Bush
is he? Okay.
Senior?
Bush Senior.
This is the type of guy.
Clarence Thomas, but the type of guy. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, also, like, another thing that came out in the recordings was that Martha Ann Alito, who has had a lot of flag issues of late.
Fun with flags over there at the Alito house.
She is not ceding flags to the gays this one.
Oh my God. Well, she said something like, she said that she wanted to put up a Vergonia flag for the month of Pride, which means shame in Italian, as a response to the LGBTQ plus Pride flags. So that was an interesting part of the conversation. But I'm also just like, I've never encountered someone who thinks so much in flag format. You know what I mean? Who really like reserve so much of their personal expression to flags. And hey, Martha, you're very unique in that way. And bless you. I mean, someone has to have that quality, and you're the one. But I guess one of the things, I mean, there's something about getting these recordings that, first of all, like, I wonder ethically, I'm not sure this is a great way to get these kinds of recordings, but whatever. That said, I
want to jump in on that, if that's
please,
okay.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I am all for these secret recordings.
Okay.
I will say that I'm all for them when the more straightforward and above board method of us being able to communicate on this topic that has so clearly broken down. I think we are kind of forced into this corner of having to manipulate and trick people into revealing the things because it's so clear that the objective and the rewards and getting your butt in that seat on the Supreme Court really requires you to do some sidestepping, if not outright hiding of what your position is. So if that had been a more substantive and honest process, I don't think that we would be in a situation where we kind of need to find these more kind of like seemingly intimate one-on-one conversations where people can kind of reveal their true self. I think it's an indication of where we're at when the way that the system is supposed to work has broken down to this point.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear, listeners, what do you think of people doing these kinds of secret recordings to get something? Because Chief Justice Roberts also was subject to the secret recording. And one of the things he ended up saying on tape was, would you want me to be in charge of putting the nation on a moral path? That's for people we elect. That's not for lawyers. And I thought that was, I think Roberts got the memo many years ago of like, I don't get to say whatever the fuck I want. I have to preserve the dignity of this institution by saying stuff like that. Like, oh, it's just not for me to say. I'm a lawyer.
That's a different objective though than Alito's objective, which is to put us, to say that
the Catholic Church,
the godly side needs to win.
Yeah. It's true. But again, and again, that's, I guess, going back to Jordan's point about let's vote so that we get more normal people. We should have people whose objective is the preservation of the justice system and the Constitution. Like, it shouldn't be other things. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? If sexy werewolves is one of your objectives, that's not what we need. You know what I mean? We don't need, if being able to communicate solely through flags is one of your things, that's not,
I wonder if she
we
does
don't need
semaphore.
that.
I wonder if she does that like flag signaling they teach in Boy
Yeah.
Scouts.
I will say that my statement tote bag game is really like, I'm
Oh,
a
yeah.
fan of the tote bags that have pithy sayings
Oh
and
my God.
announce my
Hey,
identities to the world.
where is the investigative reporting on statement totes? I feel like this
Right.
is an unearthed whole area of stuff that we could start reporting on.
Sure.
That's a really good point, Amanda.
Jill
Jesus
Biden has a
Christ.
coexist bumper sticker. I'm already planning my Catholic costume for when I have to go undercover. Maybe I'll do like Irish cop. Maybe I'll do like
Jordan, by the way, went into Catholic costume from minute one of this conversation, and that's all. I could just see him building the costume in his head.
Mhm.
You would look very good in that cardinal red.
Oh, thank you. Just, swinging one of them incense balls around.
Yeah.
This guy's Catholic.
Just casually at a cocktail party.
I am Catholic, and what are you going to use?
As a Catholic. All right, folks, let us move on to topic number 3. Okay, I don't know about you, but it seems like to me that suddenly everyone is a life coach or has a life coach or is thinking about getting a life coach. The industry is worth $4.6 billion. That was reported in 2022. And the number of coaches have increased from 54% from 2019 to 2022. So it is a very big industry with lots of gains in the last few years. And before we get into any of the issues surrounding the life coaching world, have either of you ever used a life coach?
Yes, and I also would put myself in the coaching category as well.
Okay, so yeah. Oh, so then like in an ideal situation, what is someone getting out of a life coach, and how often and what is the term of that, of having to see them?
So it's really funny. And I will say that my path to coaching came because I am trained as a clinical social worker and had worked under my license as a social worker for a number of years. But one of the differences that we see between coaching and, for example, seeing a licensed mental health professional is like the mental health world is very regulated. In fact, like I practice as a coach in many cases because I want to work with people outside of a geographic designation, whereas my mental health licensure would require that I only work with people who are in states where I am licensed.
Right.
So in some ways, it's kind of like I appreciate that we're coming from the perspective that consumers need some kind of protection, that there are bodies that can provide some oversight and regulation, and to try to screen out some of the bad actors who are out there, charging people a ton of money for nothing of value. But it's tough because sometimes we have a wonderful resource, but the way that that resource is regulated is too restrictive in other ways. So it's a spectrum. I think that a lot of people need life coaches for the same reason that they kind of are seeking out therapists, is because like life is hard. Life is really hard. And sometimes it can be so helpful to have somebody who does have some training and expertise. And I think there's so many great coaches and so many great coaching programs. So the benefit of having the attention and the feedback and the support and the direction from somebody can be incredibly helpful for a person in being able to overcome either kind of personal obstacles or to be able to kind of organize their efforts. If you're like an ADHD brain, where you're pulled in the direction of every kind of shiny object, having somebody kind of sit on you once a week and go, no, it's got to be, let's focus on this, let's do this. I think that a lot of people benefit from that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't also a lot of folks who are either hooked up with maybe some unscrupulous people, or maybe they don't have the kind of strength of their own boundaries to be able to notice when they're getting into territory where they're being taken advantage of financially, or the victim of malpractice.
I totally, and I think it's interesting if like, I remember, so I've totally worked with a life coach, actually, like who kind of more referred to herself as a career coach, who almost worked exclusively with like actors and entertainers and writers, like people in the entertainment business. And she basically, it's like I feel like one of the things about the growth of the industry that tracks for me is the growth of like the gig economy. So there's so many people who are now have to like build careers that are like these weird amorphous things where they do 12 things instead of just one. And so it kind of makes sense that you then have more decision fatigue, and you kind of like end up needing more guidance. You know what I mean? And so I went to this woman who was phenomenal, and she would give, and I would kind of go in like every few years for a tune up for like a couple of months. And she basically would be like, okay, what do we want to do? And she would like sort through my bullshit to be like, it sounds like you want to do this. You know what I mean? Is that right? Like, because I had so much decision fatigue over the many channels in which I can pursue my career, right? And so I really loved it. I totally recommended her to other people, and I always felt really good about that. Interestingly, my husband was similarly pursuing some kind of like switch change in his career, and he was looking up some things. She charged me some reasonable figure. I can't remember. It was like $150 a session or something. The average price is $244 a session. My husband was looking at some of these people, and the prices were like, you need to commit to $5,000 for like a 10-week something, and a blah, blah, blah. And I kept being like, I don't know. That sounds like, why do you have to commit to that? You know what I mean? Like, why don't you go to someone until you don't need to? I don't know. So that I started to sort of see in recent years, like a little bit more of those scammy things come into play, where where I said to my husband, like, I just smell something a little weird about that, and he ended up not doing it because it also felt weird to him too. So I don't know, Jordan, what do you think of the growing world of life coaching?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been to one. I have a therapist that I see every week, and I really love that arrangement and that relationship, and I think everybody should do it. And yeah, I mean, part of why I feel good about doing it is that like this person has training and a license and like there's
Right.
oversight. But like it's interesting listening to y'all's experience because I do, you know, as an entertainment person, I spend a lot of time in there complaining about the entertainment industry. I'm like, well, the job's IATSE, it's not WGA, so I'm getting points for a different health insurance. And like, I'm like, okay, maybe in that case, like talking about it with a, you know, person who specializes in like entertainment careers could be really helpful because like
Yeah.
at a certain point, like you do need a little advice or you do need a little perspective on that specific thing. It's like, it's not like, you know, like, oh, how does IATSE writing feel versus WGA writing, right? Like the therapist shouldn't do that. But, you know, but I think you're just absolutely right is like, people should have some sort of training. They should have some sort of license, and that should make you feel better about working with them. Dating in LA, I feel like I've dated a lot of people who give a lot of money to shamans.
Oh
And
gosh,
it's always like,
yes.
hey, you know, whatever works for you. If it's working for you, it's good. But like maybe we supplement the therapist with the shaman. Maybe we don't exclusively see the shaman, you know, like maybe that's not all you do, but that's something you add to a cocktail that includes a licensed therapist.
I mean, I think one of the things that was like, you know, that worked for me about seeing this life coach was like she just didn't want me to be seeing her all the time.
Yeah.
Like, her business model wasn't to keep me, on the hook.
Yeah.
Like, and I think her business model is like, let's get some things in place and then you go and implement, and then like if you need to come back in 6 months or a year or a couple of years or whatever, and then we'll reassess, and I felt like that felt really good. And some of these stories that are coming out are like these multi-level marketing pyramid schemes where coaches are training coaches to become coaches, where it's just
Right.
like this, and obviously with like a kind of more nascent industry, those are the kinds of things that are going to happen. And it looks like places like the American Federation of Coaches are kind of rising to the surface of like something that'll weed out some of these kind of negative players. Amanda, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that we should acknowledge that the business model, we're talking about business models here, the business model of the helping profession is weird. It's weird. Like as a therapist, where we are used to paying a therapist for their time, that makes a lot of sense to us. Like, this is my time, this is how much I'm going to pay for this. But for the practitioner, that really doesn't allow you any way to kind of scale your business or develop your business outside of how much you're charging in that hourly rate until you kind of break that model and you move into something else, whether that's a package, whether that's kind of this, having the kind of downstream coaches and taking the percentage. So I think that from the consumer perspective, I totally get it. And I'm very sensitive to the issues there. But I will say that there are a lot of folks on the provider side who are just trying to figure out, like, how do I make a living? If I am an exceptional coach, what are the ways that I kind of signal how exceptional I am in a way that doesn't necessarily make me only able to work with people who are able to afford a particularly kind of exorbitant
fee. Yeah. Oh, folks, I loved having this insider viewpoint, Amanda, on the industry. All right, you let me know, folks. Do you work with a life coach? What do you think? You have good experiences, as I did? You have bad experiences? There's a piece that we read in the Times all about it. It was really fascinating, so check that out if you want to read. All right, folks, that is the end of the show. My God, what a fun conversation. What I would really love is for the people of Fake the Nation to be able to follow you and all of the wonderful things that you do. Jordan Morris, where do they do that?
Yeah, so as Negin mentioned, I do a podcast called Jordan Jesse Go over at MaximumFun.org. Negin was on recently and did a great job. I think
Thank you so much.
one of those episodes where I'm like, recommend this one to friends. Recommend this
Yeah!
episode. So fun, so funny. We talked about mushroom trips. We talked about so we went there. It was so great, so fun. But yeah, as you also mentioned up top, I wrote a graphic novel coming out on July 16th. It is called Youth Group. The art is by a great artist named Bowen McGuire. You recognize their work from a great series called Spectre Inspectors and Marvel Comics. And it is the story of a bunch of teenage exorcists. It is a YA horror comedy about kids who are in a goofy Bible study group who also have to fight demons and perform exorcisms and keep hell beasts from destroying the world.
Fun.
Yeah, thank you. It's a little bit Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's a little bit Shaun of the Dead if you like that stuff. And it is available for pre-order now. It comes out July 16th, as I mentioned. But boy, pre-orders are really important for books. So if you like the idea, if it sounds like something you'd be into, give us a pre-order. You can go to bit.ly/youthgroupbook, bit.ly/youthgroupbook. And you can see Bowen's gorgeous cover. You can see a bunch of the early pages, and you can get a bunch of pre-order links. Do that wherever you get a book, but better yet, your local indie bookstore. We love those spots, and they'd be happy to pre-order it for you.
Guys, this book sounds so fun. I really think you should be pre-ordering right now. And Jordan's right, pre-orders really, really matter for kind of health of a book. Amanda, where do they find you?
You can find me on the Audible platform. I am hosting an Audible original called Emotional Investment, where I am having conversations with a variety of different people from all different walks of life about the role of money in their lives. And, here's a spoiler alert. It is painful and difficult and sometimes funny, but it is honest. And I think that it's one of the things that's really missing in our society. One of the things that's really missing in our society are frank and open and supportive conversations about money. So I would really encourage people to find that on Audible and listen in. You can also find me. I'm a reluctant social media person, but I do try to show up there with some good content. So you can find me at my website, amandaclayman.com, or Amanda Clayman on Instagram, and then very occasionally on TikTok.
All right, so follow Amanda on all those things, but definitely check out the show, because that sounds like something we all need to figure out. And you know where to find me and all the things that I do. Next week I'll be in Chicago doing Wait, Don't Tell Me on June 20th. So if you happen to be in town, see if you can get tickets to the live show. It's always a really good time. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone who makes the show a possibility. That's our wonderful producer, Andrew McGuire. Thanks to everyone at Headgum who makes the show a possibility. Thanks to Gaby Alter for writing our theme music. Like I mentioned before, if you have any ideas, email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to support the show at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. And if you write a review on Apple or Spotify, it really does help people find the show. And folks, we want people to find the show, and we want more of those people to keep coming and enjoying the beauty and the wonder that is Fake the Nation. So that is it. We will be back in your earballs next week.
That was a Headgum podcast.